am as giddy as a schoolgirl on prom night because today my guest is a true Renaissance man, Ryan Langdon. He does it all. He is attending medical school at Francis Marion University on his way to becoming a physician assistant. And he's a boxing instructor. He writes screenplays, and he blogs about the human condition. And he also just happens to be my nephew. So in light of that fact, Ryan, I just want you to feel comfortable addressing me today as Mr. Norman.
Okay, I'll have to do that.
All right. Now, actually, there's a cousin on my father's side of the family who used to call my father Mr. Norman, as if he didn't even realize we were cousins. My father used to always get a big kick out of that. But you can call me by my gang name. How about that? Sweet Cheeks.
Sweet Cheeks?
Yeah, it's not a very tough gang, obviously. But
yeah, I don't know if I can get on board with that, but we'll try it out once or twice and see how it goes.
All right. So I'm very impressed with the way you are living your life. That was not sarcasm when I referred to you as a Renaissance man. I'm curious how you're connecting the dots, because I know being a physician assistant is probably going to be a lot different in the coming years than it has been in past years, due to maybe other factors too, but in part because of the coronavirus pandemic. It seems that the medical profession is being redefined, and that may open up some opportunities for you to play a role that you otherwise would not play. Is that kind of how you look at it?
Well, yeah, I mean, the world is constantly changing. So there's going to be a lot more digital medicine. There's going to be a lot more people that don't have to leave their house to get medical advice. And I think that's good for a lot of reasons. Easier access. Also, just I think it helps with mental health, people that can just like reach out immediately and talk to people. So there's a lot of benefits, and I hope it's for the best.
Now, are there different options as to what one's approach to the profession might be, in terms of what you might focus on, or, how you might conduct your career, or you just got to sort of plug into what the industry is?
So the good thing about PA school is that it has a lot of lateral mobility. So I could start out into a profession. For example, I want to do pediatric oncology. And that's a pretty tough field to get into, and a lot of people in that field get burnt out. So I could just one day wake up and decide that I want to go into neurology or mental health, and I could just switch fields overnight. So we're taught every single specialty, how to treat, how to diagnose, what to prescribe for almost everything. So I think
at this point, it sounds like you're flexible and you haven't really committed to a very specific path.
Like I said, I'm aiming towards pediatric oncology right now.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but that could change. What I was thinking about your blog, I described it as, sort of thematically, when you look at all the different blog posts, I described it as writing about the human condition. Meaning, I guess what you do is you find things that aren't necessarily obvious about why we behave and how we behave as we do, and that's what you write about. Is that a fair way to sum up what your mission, so to speak, is with the Inside My Mind blog?
I don't think I have a mission. So I genuinely think I like to observe people and see how they behave. And it's interesting to watch people do things in life without even realizing that they're doing things. There's a lot of patterns that you could pick up on people and groups of people. So I just write about things that I don't think other people are thinking about typically.
Yeah, and one of them attracted, I think, I have the statistics here, a gazillion views.
A gazillion and 7, I think, to be specific.
Yeah. You wrote about your discovery or observation that many people don't have an internal monologue. What was that all about?
So that wasn't my discovery. It was actually by a clinical psychologist who works at UNLV, and he's been researching how people think, not like what they think, but how. And I saw his research on the internet, and it was kind of baffling because it's one of those things that you don't think about. You think that everyone just thinks the same. And then I asked someone, do you have the ability to say words in your head, or do you think with dialogue? And they didn't. And then I put a poll on Instagram and found out that like 17% of my followers didn't have an internal monologue. And
what is the substitute for that? Like if one doesn't, like I have an internal monologue, and, and I'm with you, that was kind of a surprise. But even after reading what you wrote, I'm having trouble grasping how they function. What is the substitute for people who don't have an internal monologue? Hello? I think we may have an internet problem. Ryan is frozen. Well, let's see. We may have to postpone or start again. Let's see if he comes back. Or maybe he's just giving me the silent treatment because he didn't like the question. That's possible. But I'm going to bet on an internet connection, an internet problem, because even though he might want to give me the silent treatment, I don't think he'd have the ability to hold his face perfectly still. What are you using for an internet connection? A string between two Dixie cups?
I don't know. You're going to have to yell at my school. Where were we? I forgot where I was. Are we back live?
Yes, we are back live, and I was speculating that you might be giving me the silent treatment because you didn't like the question, but then I figured even if you were doing that, you wouldn't be able to keep your face completely still like that. It was frozen. So that was an internet problem. You're back. Do you have intermittent internet problems there at Francis Marion University?
It's uncommon, so I hope it doesn't happen again.
All right. Maybe because I used foul language when I said known as sweet cheeks, the algorithms recognized it and said we can't have this. Is Francis Marion University an example of one of those schools where everybody has to be very politically correct, and if you're not, that's the end of your life?
I'm in South Carolina, so probably not. I don't think that they are super progressive with things like that. But obviously, as a professional, I should remain professional. Right. But in this, it doesn't really matter.
Okay.
I was saying about you found it difficult to comprehend how some people could think without an internal monologue, correct?
Right. Yeah. What is their substitute for coping with life?
So there's about 5 different ways that people think or form thoughts. One is internal monologue, obviously. 2 is they can visualize something. So hypothetically, they want a hot dog. They'll see a hot dog in their mind. 3, you may feel that you want a hot dog, just deep down, you just feel it. Some people may taste mustard. Some people may feel anxious that they could afford a hot dog, but they can't afford a hamburger. And then my personal favorite, which a lot of people do, but don't realize it, is called unsymbolized thinking. And that's when you could be walking down the street and see a dog and you just know it's a dog. You don't have to say it's a dog in my head. You just know it. And a lot of people do that without even thinking. People could have huge thoughts that can encompass a whole idea, and it could just happen like that without any visuals or words, and it's very effective.
Now, is talking to oneself part of the same thing as an internal monologue, or is that a different ball of wax altogether?
So you mean talking out loud or inside your head?
Well, I think talking inside your head is the internal monologue. So I'm asking about talking out loud to oneself. Is that part of this situation that you're addressing?
Well, from my experience, I've noticed that the people that don't have an internal monologue tend to talk out loud to work through
Mhm.
their thoughts.
Right.
I do both, so it's tough to tell.
Yeah, I do both too, and I'm not even a Renaissance man.
Mhm.
So another one of your Facebook posts was about the inability to recognize faces. So there's somebody who maybe in your life you've met a number of times, who the rest of us, if in that situation, would recall, and a certain amount of people will come face to face with the person they've met, and they just won't recognize them.
Yeah, so your brain does a lot of cool things where it fills in the gaps in certain areas. So
Hmm.
if I'm looking at someone's face, you don't see a single nose, two eyes, a mouth, facial hair. It's just all just like one image to you when you see it. But some people don't have the ability to differentiate different parts of the face, or it just doesn't look familiar to them. So they could even see a loved one and have to recognize them by their voice and not their face.
Okay, yeah, I was about to say you mentioned they compensate for it, but recognizing the voice is something people would do anyway. Is
Mhm.
there any visual compensation, like maybe they'll remember the clothing or anything else?
Hairstyles is a big one. A lot of people recognize hair.
Right. A lot of people remember me by my hairstyle, so I can relate. So your latest article is about how much you hate Facebook. Facebook, what was the title of it? Facebook is the devil. Face,
Facebook is a disease.
Facebook is a disease. Yet
Logical.
you do use Facebook, so I guess it's sort of a love-hate relationship minus the love part, something like that.
It was kind of an ironic post a little bit because I posted it on Facebook itself,
Right.
um, probably to a group of people that don't care or didn't read it or um, are blind to what I was talking about. So, or they're just who I am writing about. So it's just fun.
Right. I understand there are writing devices, and you exaggerate and take a particular point of view that doesn't necessarily represent every thought in your head. So suffice to say, you recognize some negative aspects about Facebook, but it's not completely a devilish enterprise.
I think it has a lot of great qualities. It connects people. I mean, you live in California, I live in Connecticut. I can see what you're doing. You can see what I'm doing. You
Right.
can keep up with people. But then there's this dark underbelly of Facebook that people don't realize how it's affecting their mind and how it's just affecting life as a whole and communities and stuff. And that's what it was mostly about.
Yeah. Well, let's go through a few of the points you made. One is that you characterized Facebook as a catalyst for negativity. What do you mean by that?
So if something good happens, no one really cares. And that's a really sad reality. But if something tragic happens, if there's accidents, deaths, um, racist comments, uh, riots, those are the ones that get shares, and therefore people want to write articles or make videos about all that negative stuff so they could get shares. And then eventually there's this point where that's all you're seeing on Facebook. You just keep seeing negative things over and over again to the point where you think the world around you is a lot worse than it really is. And it's going to become a problem, I think, in the future.
Well, yeah, I mean, you predicted a collapse of our society. Did you mean that literally, or that's a little bit of Ryan Langdon hyperbole?
Um, I don't think in the near future, but I do see the internet and Facebook and social media becoming a huge divide in groups of people to the point where it causes significant backlash in civilizations. And like that's not even hyperbole. That's a serious thing I think about.
Right. Well, I'm not sure how much I agree, but I definitely see the negative effects you're talking about. One thing that I think about is that uh, humans, and Americans in particular, because I happen to be a lot more familiar with Americans, having traveled around the world very little. But at least Americans, if not all humans, have a lot of bad qualities, frankly. I mean, I don't want to sound like a misanthrope, but we are ignorant, we are biased, we fail to evaluate evidence. There's all sorts of failures that existed prior to social media. So I think the other side of the coin, one side is the one you mentioned, which is that Facebook spreads negativity. But the other side is it brings to the surface bad qualities that were already there. Isn't there something positive about that, rather than keeping these negative qualities buried and not realizing them, not pretending they're not there?
Yeah, but there's two, like, that's a complex statement, because on one hand, yeah, it brings to light a lot of bad qualities that need to be brought to light, but it also brings to light liars that maybe want to exclude information, or just only include certain aspects of details to things, just to make a point that people are bad, when they're not telling the whole truth, and no one is seeing the whole truth for everything. They're just seeing little details to things just really quickly, and then that's all they're getting out of it, and that's the problem.
Well, you mentioned, the truth, and in the last year, I guess, last few months, there's been a call from various quarters for Facebook. And by the way, before I ask this question, I should mention, or I want to also ask, do you think Facebook is particularly negative out of all the social media platforms, or did you just choose to single out Facebook? Could the same be said about Twitter or any of the others?
I think Facebook is probably the worst. Twitter can be pretty bad. Mm-hmm. But the reason why Facebook is so bad, I think, is just the ability to comment on everything that's being shared, and you see everyone that's commenting on things, and it causes a lot of divide and people fighting, and it's the most evident. Twitter's pretty bad too, obviously, I can't neglect that, but
right. Okay. Well, I started to say that in the last few months or so, I'm not sure the precise time frame, various people have called for Facebook and some of the other social media platforms as well to play more of an active role in monitoring what's truthful and what isn't. Mm-hmm. Do you happen to know who Nina Brown is?
No, I know the name, but I'm not familiar.
Nina Brown is a communication professor at your alma mater, Syracuse University. Cool. And she comments on these issues from time to time. Let me show you some video of a news story that broke this week, and Nina Brown is giving her opinion.
Facebook announced last week that it was going to begin adding labels to all messages about voting. Basically, a label that leads someone, if they click on it, to a USA.gov page where they can get more information from a third party about the content provided in that post. Labeling a post to let users know that something is about voting seems really unnecessary, unless you're going to label it to let them know, here, there's a potential problem with this. It's important to recognize that Facebook has no legal obligation to do anything. The only motivation for Facebook is likely comes down to a financial motivation.
I think it's correct that in the past, Facebook wouldn't have taken any action. I think this does show that they are at least responding to some of the criticism and trying to take more affirmative steps. We are going to see, especially leading up to the election, the major platforms and probably even a lot of the smaller ones being very, very sensitive to what they consider to be disinformation regarding the election, regarding voting rights, regarding polling places, regarding the integrity of the election.
So before you comment on that, Ryan, I want to mention that one of the points you mentioned in your blog post, and by the way, it's in on the Facebook page where we're broadcasting, and there is a link to that, insidemymind.me.
Lost you again.
The homepage. Lost me again. I got you. Can you hear me? You don't hear me? Oh, we lost him again. All right. Well, while Ryan is hopefully reconnecting, let me just mention that one of the points he mentioned in his post, here he is. You're back. This is fun.
What were you saying? You were going on about the post?
Yeah, one of the points you made was that 60 to 70% of what's shared on Facebook is done without the person who shares it even reading what it is they're sharing. Mm-hmm. And you linked to another article somewhere that went into that a bit deeper and explained how these thoughtless shares are shaping our beliefs, our political and cultural agendas, and so forth. So I mention that because it seems like Professor Brown's point is somewhat related in the sense that here we have Facebook playing an active role in our election. What's your feeling about Facebook playing that role and supposedly helping us see what's the truth and so forth?
So let me just talk. Let me backtrack a little bit about what I was talking about. So what Facebook does is it has an algorithm that displays things on your feed that it thinks that you like. So hypothetically, if you're a Democrat or a Republican, a lot of things that will pop up onto your feed are things that are related to that. Or if you're a sports fan or a comedy fan, whatever you're interested in will pop up. And the people that are interested in the same things as you will pop up too. So what that does is, at the end of the day, all you're doing is seeing things from your point of view, and you're not getting the opportunity to see a lot of other things. Like if you're a Democrat, you're not objectively being able to see things from the Republican side, because everyone that's on your side is just sharing a bunch of things that are negative towards Trump or just whatever is going on. I don't want to get too political with this, but and on the other side too. And I don't think that just because they're adding the ability to like see if things are true or fake is going to affect that, because you're still going to keep seeing the same things over and over again that align with your ideas and vision, if that makes sense.
Right. I understand. So do you think that Facebook, that it's the proper role for Facebook to be monitoring what is the truth and what isn't, and providing what they claim is help in that regard?
I'm not the one to say. I think it's not a Facebook issue. I think it's a human issue. We're just not we don't care as much about looking into the details as people used to be. It's right. So quick and easy just to read a headline and share it than it is to actually objectively look at something and form your own unbiased opinion. For example, I was seeing a ton of Democratic left-wing articles being shared over and over and over again about Trump and things that he was saying. And I saw one article that was just extremely outrageous. And I was just like, that can't be true. There's no way he said that. Yeah. So I looked into it, watched the video, watched the whole thing, and it was nothing remotely racist or anything at all. And it was like a huge wake-up call. So I started doing that for a whole bunch of things on both sides. So every time I saw an argument, I would look at the left-wing side and the right-wing side and compare what I agreed with. And I don't think anyone does that anymore.
Yeah. Well, not many people, but I do. It's a little bit painful sometimes. I try to watch a little bit of all three of the main cable news networks. not because I actually enjoy it, but because I want to stay up on, what's going on in my country. And part of knowing what's going on in my country is seeing how the public is influenced. And you're absolutely right. I applaud you for recognizing that. Some people never recognize it, never even think about this. And as it regards Trump, it's so ironic because one of the main criticisms that the anti-Trumpers have of him is that he lies. And then you look at the other side, they say it as if they tell the truth. It's preposterous. They constantly, I think you said you just started noticing this. Continue to watch it. They do it constantly, like every day in multiple ways, constantly lie about what he said and misrepresent him.
Yeah. And that's what the article is about, is it's becoming an issue where all people are doing is fighting over their sides, and the actual individual issues are getting completely neglected. No one is talking about the actual problems. It's all about winning, about like your side, and that's sickening. For example, I was in an argument with someone because they were saying about how building the wall was racist. So I actually looked into that and what the ideas behind it were, and it makes objective sense. There's literature behind it. There's a lot of facts to back up the claims that are being made. And everyone is fighting over, it's racist, it's not racist, it's racist, it's not racist, when no one is actually fixing a problem that needs to be fixed.
Right. People obsess over the most the tiniest, pettiest things as if they're important, and it's so ridiculous. Immigration advocates, in my opinion, are among the dumbest, most clueless people in the world, and immigration advocates are people of all races. So I hope nobody claims what I just said is racist.
Oh, they will, though.
Yeah, they will. So what? But the reason I say that is because they're focusing on the most unimportant thing, which is the wall. Philosophically, morally, in a practical sense, the wall isn't even a new concept. This country has always limited access to the country, and they do it in part by relying on physical barriers to do that, as well as armed federal officers and electronic surveillance. But we've always used physical barriers to limit access. So in essence, Trump, even though people don't like his rhetoric or his personality, all he's doing is suggesting maintenance. They're really reacting to his personality and his rhetoric. And if you really care about immigrants, what you should focus on is how many people are getting into the country, what the criteria are for getting in, how people are treated once they get in. All that is what people should comment on and worry about. And just forget about the wall. Who cares about the wall? It's so unimportant.
That's the issue, is Trump is not really good at speaking to large groups of people. He's good at speaking to a selected group of people. But people get wrapped up in that part and are not actually listening to the actual things that are being done or said. And I was in a debate, I guess, an argument with my friend who's pretty radically left. And it took me like a half hour just to explain how 7% of our population is illegal immigrants and how much money it costs to deal with that. And we were completely neglecting the fact that we both don't want to spend a lot of money on that, and we want to spend money where it should be used, as in education, healthcare. Those are the things that should be being debated, not whether a wall is racist.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It's just as stupid as prison rights advocates. Imagine if prison rights advocates were to worry about the wall around the prison. They're not that clueless, because it doesn't matter. They worry about what gets people in prison. They worry about how prisoners are treated when they're in prison, and they worry about how they get back into society as productive people when they get out. They don't object to the idea of keeping them in prison when they're in, right? It's stupid. All right, I'm preaching to the converted. I see you agree with me, but I've been thinking about this for a while, and you gave me an opportunity to spout off. Let me ask you about something else you mentioned in your post. And frankly, I'm a little skeptical about it, but if you're right, it's kind of a huge revelation, and it warrants looking at more closely. You wrote about hanging out with a friend who showed you an ad for a kayak or something about a kayak on his cell phone. And then you said the next day you were getting kayak ads on Facebook. Can you explain what that's all about? Or did I just do it?
You just did it. I mean, what is it all about? Why is that happening? There's only one reason why that's happening, and it's because they can have access to your microphone. When you download the app on Facebook, no one reads the terms or whatever, that whole thing, and it gives them access to your location. It gives them access to your phone. And I was just talking about kayaks. I've never had an ad for a kayak in my life. And the next day I open up Facebook and there's ads for kayaks.
Well, you say there's only one explanation, but really there's one explanation that has occurred to you. There may be an explanation that hasn't occurred to you. The reason I'm skeptical is because it seems like it's the sort of thing that would be happening constantly if it happened in that case, and we probably would have noticed it already.
Oh,
so maybe
have noticed it for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what your theory is that Facebook through your phone recognized your voice, and then because you were talking about kayaks, it then programmed it so that kayak manufacturers would show you their advertising.
I was talking to a former Google employee who's a pretty high level computer engineer, and he had to take a class on computer ethics, and the amount of information that they have on you is absurd. It's insane. Because he was able to like look into who had his information specifically. And there was like a bunch of car dealerships when he was looking for cars. It's just like a bunch of random businesses all have access to his data and your data and my data. And there's a lot of people in the industry that firmly believe that it listens to you. Like, do you know the Alexa? Like you say, hey, Alexa, play a song or whatever.
Yes, Alexa and I have a very close relationship, but let's not get into the details.
It's always listening to that. I mean, we could look into it.
I don't doubt that the technology exists. It obviously does. But that's a very sophisticated, not obviously intrusive too, but it just seems so damn sophisticated that it's hard to imagine how it actually works. I guess what I'm getting at is we're constantly talking. So how is it that it's determined which of those conversations result in advertising? You know what I mean?
I am probably the wrong person to talk to you about this, but you're
the only guy I have here, so I'm going to rely on you.
Yeah, I mean, well, I can't give firm facts, so I don't like to speak on stuff that I'm not super educated on, but the amount of information that Facebook collects on people throughout their interests and everything is collected, and advertisements have the ability to access those people and market their product to the people most likely to be interested in that. So
well, it's enormous. It's enormous, and that's common knowledge. I don't dispute it at all. And like I said at the outset, when I first mentioned this issue, if it's true, we should look into it more. But let me throw just off the top of my head another possible explanation at you. because we know that they're collecting data digitally, if that's the right word, as opposed to just simply, listening in to you. So your friend has whatever content he has on his phone about kayaks. Could it be that what they have is you are one of his Facebook friends, and maybe you're in contact with him a little more often than some other Facebook friends, and that's the reason you got the ad, something like that, as opposed to listening to your voice?
I mean, that's a good theory, but it would be a lot more credible if he actually had a Facebook.
Okay. Well, is there any other comparable possibility?
Maybe it was mentioned in a text message to me from him, but I know for a fact I did not Google anything to do with kayaks or look up anything on the internet about kayaks, because I don't care about kayaks. Well,
you say, doesn't that make your theory a little bit more, if not far-fetched, more complicated, if it's true? If your friend doesn't even have a Facebook page, that would mean, if your theory is true, that it's not just Facebook doing it, they're partnering with some other spy, right? I mean, if your friend doesn't have a Facebook page.
Yeah, who knows? It's a pretty scary thought, how much people know about you that you don't even know. So many people have information on you.
All right, I don't want to badger you too much, because at the next family gathering, everybody's going to gang up on me for being too hostile. So I'll mellow out.
I just don't want people to think that I am paranoid and I think that aliens are going to abduct us or anything. But I genuinely think that Facebook is a lot more intrusive than it should be. That's the ultimate statement that I'll stand by. I can't confirm or deny if they're listening through your phone, but the high-level Google employee that I talked to doesn't doubt it, and it's very possible.
Let's keep our eye on that and see if we can either confirm or debunk that theory in the coming month using good old-fashioned evidence.
Okay, fair.
All right, so let's close this chat by I just want to ask you if you think there's any way to kind of mitigate the harmful effects of Facebook. I mean, I guess one can choose to do it in one's own life. You were saying that, in-person interactions are much healthier because, when you're online, you sort of have a license to insult people in horrible ways that you never would do in person. So I guess one could choose in their own life to just not use Facebook as much and try to have real relationships. Although with the pandemic going on, that's an additional challenge. But do you have any other thoughts about what could steer us more in the right direction to kind of counter the negative effects of Facebook?
It's such a loaded question. Well, unfortunately, the trend that I'm seeing is not getting any better. It's getting worse. People are getting more and more divided. People have their views. They get grouped and they start arguing in groups, which is a problem because you start lumping people together based on one fact instead of addressing each individual based on each individual issue. So the only way to solve this issue is if people learn that and they start teaching their children, teaching their friends, teaching their family to, if they're speaking to one person, address that one issue and don't group people together, because it's pushing people farther apart and it's only going to get worse. And
right,
I don't see a good result at the end.
And you also mentioned in your post, as an example of the kind of accusation that's a baseless accusation that people throw around a lot, is claiming that somebody is a racist when there's really no solid evidence of that.
Yeah.
Is that I assume you gave that as an example because you think it's particularly significant. Yeah.
Yeah, because people view racism as black and white instead of including a whole bunch of different factors. Maybe it's just ignorance, or maybe you are actually racist. Instead of, like, just because you vote for Trump doesn't mean you're racist. Like, it's becoming an issue where people are attacking groups of people. Republicans are attacking Democrats. Democrats are attacking Republicans, and it's baseless, and it's just a group accusation instead of, like I was saying, addressing the individual issues. Like, someone could be a black Trump voter, yet they're looped in to all Trump voters are racist. And it's like, how is that even possible? And it's, I don't know.
Right. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that Facebook makes people think the world is worse than it actually is, and that is maybe the strongest example. And I don't blame this on Facebook alone, but a lot of what's going on is leading people to think that this country has much more racism than it actually has, and it's really mind-boggling. And I love the way you put it, because the problem, and I'll try to say it in my way, which is just to kind of amplify the point you made, is that people use the word racism in new ways. Like the definition keeps expanding. It used to be just the hatred of a race, denial of rights to a race, or believing a race is inferior. That's the dictionary traditional definition. Mm-hmm. And as you put it, I don't remember the exact words, but now it's about lack of awareness. You're insensitive about racial issues and so forth and so on. And these are points that are perfectly fine to make. But the problem is when the label racism is used, it has the same sting as the more egregious examples of racism. And people shouldn't be punished because they don't have awareness or sensitivity. Why not just, treat it as ignorance that can be corrected through conversation? This whole cancel culture is just off the charts. Now, you mentioned earlier Francis Marion University is in the South, so therefore it's not as politically correct as some other schools. Your alma mater, Syracuse University, what was the story there in terms of political correctness and, issues like, asserting racism when it's not really there?
It's a big university, and big universities are known for leaning liberal. They teach liberal ideas. It wasn't like an issue. It didn't stand out to me, at least. And I don't think that's an issue to teach liberal ideas, but I do think there needs to be balance in everything. And just to go back to the racism point, I'm not saying, and you're not saying, I'm hoping, that racism doesn't exist. It exists. There's racist people out there, but it's a problem when you start calling someone racist, which has a huge negative connotation that could affect how they live their life. If they do one thing that someone part of their group that they got grouped with did something racist, exactly, and you're guilty by association. So nowadays it's either you're sensitive to everything or you're in the KKK. There's no overlap. There's no understanding of everything. And it's just not good for society. People can't talk anymore because he voted for Trump. He's racist. Not going to associate myself with him. When back in the day, so many people didn't even talk about politics and they just lived their lives and coexisted. Now there's no coexistence. Is that a word? Everyone is on a team. And when you think about it, there's a lot of literature on this, psychological literature, is that Democrats tend to be more empathetic and more open to new ideas and creativity, while Republicans are more, they want more order, or they're more controlled with their environment. And both have positive and negative things associated. For example, you want to keep structure. You want to make sure people are living their lives and they're doing things correctly and not ruining everything else for each other. That keeps people from choking each other out and killing each other in the street. And then on the other hand, empathy is more addressed towards individuality and lifting people up and providing care. And that's also important. We need both parts in society. It's like having a strict dad and a loving mom. Like the strict dad will keep you in line, make sure you're not out smoking crack, but the mom will give you a hug when you need it. You know, you need both. You can't just have either order or chaos. You need to have both. They need to coexist. And with this Facebook thing, people are just being pushed apart, and we're not working together, and it's a problem.
Well, I guess one thing that we can do, there's no easy answer to my question, what should we do to steer things in the right direction? But one thing we could do is have the kind of conversations we're having right now, write the kind of blog posts that you write, and just hope that it catches on. I mean, I don't know what else there is to do. I think it's good for one's own mental health anyway, if we're, regardless of how much of an effect it's having. And with your gazillion views, you certainly have the potential to do that. So if folks want to check out your blog, it's insidemymind.me. And it's a good place to check out, some different ways of looking at the world and looking at how we as humans behave. Thank you very much, Ryan, for talking with one of your favorite uncles today.
My favorite uncle, west of the Mississippi, I would say, probably.
Excellent. I accept that designation. All right. Talk to you soon. InsideMyMind.me, Renaissance man Ryan Langdon, a.k.a. my beautiful nephew.
Thanks for having me.
Okay.